Welcome to the Rev Engine podcast, where we help B2B CEOs and revenue leaders get clarity on how to align sales and marketing, build a high-performing revenue engine, and accelerate revenue growth for their organizations. I'm your host, Jeff Davis, author of award-winning book Create Togetherness and founder of Rev Engine. Hey everybody, it is Jeff Davis with another episode of the Rev Engine podcast, where we help B2B CEOs and revenue leaders align sales and marketing, transform their revenue engine, and accelerate revenue growth. I am very excited to have our guest on today, who is Dan Cilley. He's a CEO of Vendor Neutral. I'm going to tell you a little bit of backstory about how we met, because we've known each other for years, here and there. We'll get into that, but I want to give him a chance to introduce himself and tell how he got to where he is, and then we'll kind of dive into kind of how we know each other, because I think the story is interesting, and then we'll get into the content. So with that said, Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. My background is, quite extensive as it relates to the use in of technology. I had a previous organization before Vendor Neutral. It was called Telemaximum. It was 22 plus year organization surrounding, originally brick and mortar contact center development. And within the last, 10 years, it really started to evolve into the tech stack and, hybrid working environment, hybrid call centers, where people didn't need to be in the office anymore, and they could actually work from home and could have the same or similar result. So I realized that tech really was driving the future. And from that, I began Vendor Neutral. So Vendor Neutral started in 2017, became incorporated in 2018, and we've been growing ever since. We have over 80 companies globally as clients, and we work to help them clear the fog surrounding their sales technology identification, selection, integration, onboarding and adoption, and then also the long-term ROI so that they can achieve not only their business goals, but their financial goals.
Yeah. And just for those that don't know, Dan was actually on my original podcast, the Alignment Podcast, actually one of my first guests. And I have to say, without a doubt, it was one of the more popular episodes. And I learned a ton from you in that short episode. So I wanted to continue our relationship, and we've kind of seen each other here and there, Sales Enablement Society, some other events, that sort of thing. So I think as we kind of dive into our conversation today, people are going to really take away a lot of actionable insights. I think in addition to that, I want to share I want you to share a story about the previous podcast and kind of how that kind of turned into an opportunity for you.
Well, I think it's one of my favorite stories, so I have no problem telling it. It's Jeff and I met. We've known each other for a long time. We met years ago. I think it was actually American Association of Inside Sales Professionals.
Even
before the Sales Enablement Society was even a concept. So It's been great, following you and getting to know you. And I was on that podcast. I think we're dating ourselves, but that was about 4 years ago. And
we don't have to talk numbers.
and from that, effort, we actually we were identified by our largest client. So it's a $25 billion organization, a global organization. And since that point, it started off simple enough. They were looking for help surrounding a tech selection, which often is the reason why a lot of organizations were engaging with us back then. Things have evolved around technology stack. It's not as all about tech selection anymore. But the reason we did was tech selection. And from that effort, we have landed and expanded over the last 4 years, and we're in 10 or 15 business units on and off, and we're helping them not only with their tech selection, but their process development, sales playbooks, the integration of these resources, the adoption and ongoing onboarding and adoption of these resources. And then, like I said, the long-term ROI surrounding them. So we're always kind of resetting with this client, to kind of, refocus them, to re-engage on that strategy, on that ecosystem. So it's just been a tremendous relationship, and it's very valuable to our organization. And the first client out of that 80 that we currently have. So
Yeah. And so I am so thankful that you shared that with me, beyond like the whole like endorsement thing and making me feel cool a little bit because we helped somebody get a client. I think it really helped validate the work that I'm so passionate about of having this conversation around sales marketing alignment and how we do it differently and better. And, sometimes you get into like the slog of things and at that time for that podcast I literally was doing everything myself, so it was a ton of work, and so it just kind of validated that I should continue this work and that there was value in what we are creating. So I thank you uh, uh, for that, and it was really a really cool story to share. The other thing I was going to tell you is the reason I wanted to have you on the show, amongst other things of course, is I love the work that Vendor Neutral was doing. I have tried to, as much as possible with this platform, been as neutral as possible. Like, letting people understand what are the frameworks you should be thinking. How do you look at aligning sales and marketing? But not necessarily saying you have to use this product. We talk about product categories, of course. And so when you started Vendor Neutral, I was like, that's a genius idea. And of course, Dan started it because I can talk about it, but like he knows how to actually execute on it. So again, I love the work you're doing. I think it's really necessary because this tends to be a quagmire for a lot of revenue leaders of like what platforms and how do we do this and how do we assess, how do we do all that sort of stuff. So again, I think your work is extremely valuable. And so yeah, kudos to you and the team.
Thank you. Now, we are truly vendor neutral. Now, we don't align with any vendors or kind of consultants or service providers, except as part of our ecosystem. When it
Yeah.
comes to delivering for our clients, we do bring in the subject matter experts, around certain technologies, around certain capabilities, especially process and playbook development, because we don't want to pretend to do everything perfectly because we can't, but we want to have access to the right resources when we need them. And so that's why our ecosystem is so important. And that's why our clients really depend on us, because they know we're not going to talk vendor, and they know we're going to be
Yep.
focused on their needs, their goals, their objectives long before we make any tech recommendations. Tech is actually the last step in the process.
Yeah. Which in most cases it probably should be. So let's start with this question, which I know you're going to have a POV on. Why do most digital transformation initiatives fail?
Well, we often see that, even if everyone is working at capacity, more often something is still not clicking for an organization. But before we blame tech or the tech stack or lack thereof, we need to take a step back. Our relationship with over 80 organizations globally, has really taught us a lot. And one of those things is too many internal teams are busy talking, but they're not communicating with each other. This matters because poor communication
Mhm.
produces silos within those organizations, and that's generally what we're dealing with, right? Is this separations within the organizations? 50% of organizations report customer experience operations are managed in silos, and only 33% of the customer experience professionals that work within those groups are actively communicating or collaborating with each other across the organization. So we like to bring transparency to that as quickly as possible. There is too much tech filling up the sales tech stack and distracting users in their workflows. And, a couple statistics out there that, I reference quite often is, if a rep has a piece of technology that's not clearly aligned to their workflow, and they actually go to leverage it, it often takes weeks, no, I should say weeks, it's hours to come back to their workflow. And that's really disruptive because, an 8-hour workday can be diminished quite quickly, and their results are also reflective of that. There is one organization that I really, I sometimes reference when I'm asked this question. I'm not going to call them out because they wouldn't be happy about that. But after we audited a large enterprise, about a $5 billion organization, a global IT infrastructure company, we found that they could reduce their tech
Mhm.
stack by over 200 pieces of technology. And this is an actual 80% savings surrounding their investment
Wow.
in technology. So we were talking over $1 million a year in spend that they didn't have to think about anymore, and they could apply to their sales folks, to their marketing staff. It's so important, especially today in today's economy, that organizations think about their tech stack, as part of that ideal workflow as part of their organization's business process. And if they're, if they're not, if the technology that's in it is shelfware and it's not actually being used, take that budget, keep the sales rep on board, keep that marketing professional on board.
Yeah.
No need to lay them off. Cut the tech first.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point that I talk about a lot is this whole idea of auditing the revenue tech stack, because when you are operating in silos and the sales and marketing leader are buying new software and tech and that sort of thing, but not communicating, you many times are buying duplicative or even worse, platforms that don't integrate and don't talk. So it is imperative that we sit down for 2 seconds and say, like, what are you operating with? What are you operating with? And see where there's opportunities to just get rid of stuff and or integrate stuff or whatever it is. But I see it all the time where, marketing platforms don't talk to sales platforms, or the data is not pulling from the same data lake, whatever that is. And it destroys productivity. I think what was InsideSales.com years ago, and I know they've rebranded to Zant, talked about the fact like a third of the salesperson's time is actually focused on selling, and that may have gotten worse. And a lot of that is related to them having to do things that are non-revenue generating. So I'm glad you brought that up. So, and the workflow thing too. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if text interrupts or it lengthens or confuses the workflow, it's time to evaluate and see if it's really does or brings the value that your teams and organizations need. It's not a quick fix, but if you really want to truly transform your business through technology, you need to align to process, process, process. I have an equation we use, and I share this sometimes in social media and a lot with our clients. New tech plus old process equals expensive old process. So, you have to really think ahead and think about what technology is actually going to move that needle.
Do you find that most sales leaders are thinking about their sellers' workflow when they are looking at new technology?
No. Often technology is evaluated because of a need, right? They're trying to address one issue, one concern. And more often than not, it happens at the end user level where, they're independently have their own workflow and they think there's this piece of tech that can revolutionize it. So they go out and they spend their expense account on a new piece of tech, where they ask their manager to spend their budget. And it just ends up not really making an impact. It's especially because it's not an integrated part of that workflow, that evaluation, that audit wasn't done to make sure it would make an impact, and it becomes shelfware. And that's why you see that scaling of costs around technology. That's why that 80% opportunity to reduce was there for that client, was because throughout all these siloed parts of their organization, they just kept acquiring and acquiring and acquiring. And it's pretty quickly to figure it out. And it's easy to identify. And actually, sometimes in 40 to 60 days with our clients, we can identify those costs, that budget that's out of control, and we can help them reduce it. And well, it's a good thing for us because it's a 10x ROI more often, sometimes even 100, sometimes even 1,000x ROI compared to the investment they make in our capabilities.
Do you find, or do you agree that many times those components in the tech stack can silently kill revenue? Like they can sit in there and people, I've heard people not even knowing that certain platforms exist, and or they exist but we're not using them, and they just they kind of become like the furniture. Like you're just so used to them being there, like no one thinks about it. But the fact that you're paying for licenses is literally costing you money. Is that, would you agree with that kind of way of thinking about it?
Oh, 100%. And it comes down to if you are going to acquire the tech and you actually do see a business value, and I think it comes down to much more about onboarding and what that strategic approach really looks like. It needs to be a plan from the ground level, building of an ecosystem around technology. It takes teams forward within the tech toward a clear goal. And this is not often possible within the limits of the vendors who are selling this technology, because, a vendor sells a great customer success strategy. They always promote it as one of their great attributes. But they're not profitable unless, they've completed that customer success strategy and you're off and running with that technology. So some vendors are awesome, right? Some vendors just stick around. They become partners with the organizations that they're selling their technology to. But more often, these one-off tech acquisitions are generally done in silos, and the tech just sits there unused, or it's used for a short period of time and then becomes costly. And because of the structure of the way it's sold, it's an automatic renewal year after year, and people just lose track. If you have to find a solution for expanding and amplifying the onboarding effort. So you have to be able to scale where the vendor leaves off. So the great thing about these vendors is very often they have knowledge bases. They sometimes call it a university. They have recorded videos that they did with your team. So if you have a learning and development team, or you can even outsource or a trainer or a coach, bring them in, right? Bring them in and have them amplify that customer success effort where the vendor left off. Have them adapt it to the learning capabilities of your team, and the learning styles of your team as well, because that's what's going to drive success. That's going to drive long-term adoption and use. And if you can align that to their workflow and processes as well, the reps are going to see value right out of the gate, and they're going to want to use the technology. And the final piece there around that adoption is the best practices that the reps have achieved through using the technology. Don't keep it a secret. Don't hide the information from the rest of the organization. Get out there, tell your peers that they are successful. And that's why gamification actually can be very, a great strategy sometimes, because, showcase the fact that somebody made a difference using a piece of technology, found that next great opportunity using a technology, manage a customer-centric relationship using that technology. So instead of adding technology to solve existing crises, you have to start learning technology, understanding how technology at its core can be part of your business model. And that, it really speaks to what you think about it operationally, Jeff, is, marketing, social media, sales, operations, how all these groups work together, how all these pieces of your company work together. They need to be part of a holistic strategy, a sales technology ecosystem that's interconnected across the organization.
And that's a great segue to my next question, that I think is many times overlooked. So we've chosen the right technology, just assume we're there, but we don't get people to change their approach, their work style. So I've been talking about for quite some time this idea and concept of digital first selling, and really it's kind of transforming the way in which we sell to connect with the modern buyer, the ways that in which we were able to gate information, and they, buyers were dependent on us as sellers to get that information. That is long gone. So I want to get your idea and your thoughts on how, as a sales leader, can I actually adapt my culture so that people really actually start to use those tools and become comfortable with technology and that sort of thing, because otherwise it's just going to sit there.
Well, it comes down to communication. The culture of your organization is a top-down, bottom-up approach. If your leadership isn't aware, if you're not transparent with them on what goals you're trying to achieve through technology, because often the decisions around tech don't start at the top, and they're generally driven from the bottom up. Because of a demand or a need from the sales or marketing team to achieve their goals. And so the middle management, hears it, they understand it, and they're reactive. And so rather than being proactive and reaching out to senior leadership and conducting what we call our sales technology or stakeholder audit, you're going to struggle, because if you don't have a clear understanding of the processes that already exist within these stakeholders' organizations, if you don't have a clear understanding of the data and the insights they need to make effective business decisions. And then also don't have a clear understanding of the capabilities or lack of capabilities within their organizations, because very often, they may acquire technology that requires a lot of support, right? It requires marketing to write content,
Hmm.
requires operations to be, have an admin being very proactive on the sequencing and so on and so forth. So without those capabilities in place, without the staff understanding the true value and being able to apply these resources effectively, it's going to be a struggle. And it's actually more often than not, it's a failure right at the starting line for
Yeah.
a lot of these technologies, because they're sold on the premise of it making such a difference. But
Yeah.
the reality is that without the right process, without that analysis, without fully defining, the insights, the data, what's required to make these decisions, what leadership needs to make decisions, and then that full understanding of the process, and I call that a sales playbook more often than not, and how that aligns to the company's success. So, we recommend more often than not to our clients that they audit not only their top performers, and again, that's top 10, top 20% of their sales rep, because honestly, they know better than anybody in the company, because they sell and they sell successfully.
Yeah.
How do they do it? Why are they successful? What tech do they maybe use? Because very often, a lot of those top performers have their own tech stack, and it's good to learn from them what that means. The second group that's equally as important is the top 10, 20% of your customers. What do they need,
Okay.
right? What are they looking for from you and your organization to help them be successful? Align that to those top performing sales reps. Then you've got a magic sauce. You've got a recipe for success. You really do, because now you can transform that into a sales process that's actually going to be supported by and aligned to technology. Without that and again, as we talked about before, technology that takes you out of that strategy is
Yeah.
never going to help you be successful.
You made me reflect back on my early career in sales when I was actually carrying a bag. For those that don't know, I started my career in healthcare sales, and one of the things I think about, and I'm probably very much dating myself, is this idea of having a cross-channel conversation with buyers and or prospects. And we just really didn't have to do that back in the day, right? That you were able to, I mean, you use multiple channels, but you didn't necessarily like today have to stitch this conversation and make it holistic across channels. Have you seen organizations successfully use playbooks to help reps do this? Because I can see that as a challenge of, okay, I understand how to use these technologies. That's one thing, but can I have a holistic conversation across multiple channels with the buyer? What have you seen when organizations are trying to help sellers be able to actually communicate cross channel?
Well, I think organizations that sell into the channel, they're not unique. It's actually a very common practice is to sell through a channel.
Hmm.
But it comes down to the same model that you would leverage to understand your own organization's sales strategy is you got to bring those players in. So we talked about that top 10% of your sales folks, top 10% of the customers.
Yeah.
Another customer is that channel, right? Are the partners that you are leveraging to promote and to sell your solution beyond your core or in-house sales team. Um,
Yeah.
and you really need to educate them as much as possible. You need to keep them in the loop. Your transparency is essential. Sometimes our clients will say, don't show the partners, what we're doing. They're going to want more of it. I'm like, well, that's not a bad thing. They want more of it because they know it's going to help them move the needle. They know it's going to be, they're going to be more effective in selling your solution. Don't keep it a secret. Don't keep it in house. Share the knowledge, share the experience, share that partnership, that opportunity for partnership. Align. Be transparent, showcase results, and then again, you have to sometimes change the way you approach because again, the channel may not have the same access that
Yeah.
your team has, right? So often your team has office access to a knowledge base, a lot of content, a lot of resources, and the channel has a unique capability and a unique level of access sometimes. So we have to make sure that they are equal, and that the channel and your internal team have the same resources, have the same capability at
Yep.
the end of the day.
That makes sense. So, kind of going back to this idea of this revenue tech stack, because I want to make sure I get all of this out of you during our conversation. So, without sharing your secret sauce, if a marketing leader and a sales leader have come together and say, we think we have an opportunity to kind of audit our tech, and we want to make sure that we're more aligned, whether they're exploring, consolidating systems, et cetera, et cetera. What are kind of the high level steps they need to go through in order to conduct this type of audit to figure out where the opportunities exist where they can change things? How should they be thinking about that process?
Well, more often than not, the fragmentation or the chasm between sales and marketing, it really comes down to a lack of confidence on both sides, right? So marketing,
Interesting.
more often than not, wants to rely on the sales team for good data, right? So
Hmm.
again, CRM, right? Been around for a long time. Terrible adoption, terrible use. And
You mean no one's using the CRM? What are you
oh
talking about?
God, no, gee,
Absurdity.
surprise. And it's not helping them. It's not helping anybody. So when managers say it's got to be in the CRM if you're going to get paid, well, you know what? At the end of the day, your sales reps are going to put it in the CRM. They're going to put it as a close one opportunity, and that's
Yeah.
all the data you're going to get. So
Yeah.
what about all the prospects? What about all the contacts that exist within that prospecting strategy? So very often, marketing depends on quality data, right? So they depend on good contact information, good account detail. If you want them to produce a marketing qualified lead that turns into a sales qualified lead, you better make sure you give them the resources they need to prospect for you, to market for you, to detail out your capabilities, because at the end of the day, they need that data. So, and at the end of also the other side of the spectrum, salespeople are aggravated by the quality of those leads, right? So they stomp their feet. They say to the manager, "These leads stink." I could use another word, but
It's not really the language they use, but we'll keep it
that's why
PG.
I'm being very delicate here.
Yeah, I know,
Um,
right?
yeah, but these leads stink, and we're not getting what we want. Marketing's worthless, or a white elephant. There's no value in our marketing team. Well, the fact is if you were providing them the data they needed, the insights they needed around your prospects, they could be far more successful. That's where their capability lies. Your capability in sales lies in that customer engagement, direct qualification or disqualification of that customer, and the marketing team wants to enable that. So when they're funneling 100 leads from trade shows and outbound marketing and
Hmm.
form fills and everything into your daily funnel, they're doing that. They're doing that as quickly as they can. It's really your job in sales as well to take action, right? Not to sit on your hands when a trade show occurred 2 or 3 days ago, but to actually take those 100 leads and work them hard, qualify them. They're probably, because they came from a trade show or conference, they're probably the better qualified, the best information you're going to get because it's coming right from the conference data. And so you have a higher level of confidence as a sales professional to see success and opportunity to see success. Marketing, at the end of the day, those are some of the areas that they can get the greatest return on their investment. But our sales staff just, takes their time sometimes in addressing those leads, which is not helping anybody at all.
Yeah, and I don't know who coined this, but time kills deals. I totally stole that from somebody. It's not me, but I it's so true. So question for you. I'm curious, who stereotypically in an organization is reaching out to you and vendor neutral for help or to start a conversation?
Well, we generally work with all types of companies. Our website is just a wealth of free information. So we have under our
Yep.
learning library on our website, there is hundreds of blogs, webinars. I think it's like 74 webinars over the last few years, podcasts, you
Nice.
name it, all free. So the SMB, the small mid-sized organization, can approach it through a DIY model. Feel free. I want you to learn. I want you to take away what you need to make the effective business decisions you need. But as these organizations get larger and we get into large mid-market, small enterprise, large enterprise, it's a much bigger lift. It's a much more complicated strategy. Generally, our primary, our ICP, our primary contact or ideal customer profile is a senior leader. They're SVPs of sales, marketing, operations. They are C-level many times at the large mid-market. At the enterprise level, they may even hire innovation experts. They may be hiring business analysts that are helping them grow and be more successful. So we engage with a lot of different personas, but normally it ends up being senior leadership that starts the conversation.
So, and the reason I asked that question, because I was just curious of who in the organization was kind of either the champion or the catalyst for this sort of conversation. So it sounds like in many cases, it is above the sales and marketing leader and really is senior leadership that recognizes there's a disconnect or a dysfunctional way of doing business, and there's opportunities that we can unlock if we're looking at things differently.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes for us. It's sometimes hard for us because we have to educate, right? So a lot of people don't know what we do. They don't have a clue. They don't understand what vendor neutral is. We're doing a better job, and through these types of efforts, we're able to educate even further. But it's hard to explain that there are a number of steps prior to acquiring technology. There's a number of steps around process and fully defining that process and workflow and how that integrates with sales, operations, and marketing, how those teams are effectively working together on a daily basis. They can't work in silos. There has to be transparency. There has to be an ongoing communication. And when things work, talk about it. Share the why, the how. That's what's going to keep people motivated. That's what's going to drive continuous success.
Yeah, I love that. So to close out our conversation, I want to ask this question. So you have an organization, they've committed to digital transformation, they may be early in their journey, and they are just confused about what type of technology they need to adopt. What are some, actionable insights? What are some tips and tricks that you would suggest that they kind of think through as they're starting this journey, beyond obviously calling vendor neutral?
Well, they need to first define their sales process. They need to understand each step of that process and that playbook. And then they just need to start to think about what technology actually is going to move the needle at each of those steps in the sales process. Sometimes, if these organizations are doing it right as it relates to communication and transparency across marketing, across sales, across operations, they are sharing the why, they're sharing the how, but that sometimes doesn't align, or they don't know what tech to select to move that needle for them. So MarTech, there is a terrifying 9,000 plus solutions in the marketing, in the MarTech.
It's so funny. And not to interrupt you, but it's so funny when you put side by side the MarTech landscape and the sales tech landscape, and how MarTech just dwarfs sales tech. Because sales tech, to be honest with you, is relatively new in comparison to marketing technology. So I think that's why we're having a lot of these conversations on the sales side of the house, because a lot of these technologies are new, and marketing just looks at us like we've been automating things and we've had platforms for years. Why is this such an issue? Why are you having these conversations?
Well, there obviously are. I mean, I can't imagine that you need to have 9,000 marketing technologies.
Probably
I think that on the sales technology side, we're probably at about 1,200 if you include CRM, maybe 1,400 now. Things have rapidly been increasing the last couple of years. But on the MarTech side, the insights are coming from everywhere because there's so many pieces of technology. So we have to be able to integrate that technology with our sales process. And more
Right.
often than not, that tech can be more easily integrated into a CRM. So when that CRM is able to, articulate or define, excuse me, or define that that customer's life cycle, that customer's journey.
Hmm.
Another piece of sales tech, which again, like I said, there's far fewer, and I think sales technology organizations realize they never wanted to want a tech stack of that size. So there,
Right.
you see a lot more consolidation in the sales tech market, and I think you've seen that, especially over the last few years, when it comes to sales enablement technology, sales engagement, or prospect engagement technologies. And they're now integrated into single platforms. You're even seeing data integrated into those platforms as well. A data platform, won't call out any vendor names, but
Yeah.
if you're able to integrate those solutions all into a single strategy, you're going to see a lot more success. One of our clients, where we were trying to help both sales, marketing, or not both, but sales, marketing, and operations to be successful. We were able to quickly identify something based on an incredibly large number of installed pieces of equipment, right? So for decades, this company had been selling technology or literally, pieces of machinery into
Hmm.
organizations through a channel, right? And that channel was fabulous at selling the solutions. But the data that the company got back was a delivery address and sometimes a company name. That's really about it. So what we were able to identify working with sales, marketing, and operations was that data would help actually enable them. So if we knew the location of the delivery, we knew the company that was at that site, we could
Hmm.
apply data and the roles that were common to their decision-making process, to their ICP. We could apply that to apply that information from the databases, from the data platforms into their CRM, into their sales and marketing technology. And because of that, we could attribute these titles, the company information, maybe if it had changed. We could really start to qualify for service agreements, upsell, cross-sell opportunities, just so much opportunity. And I can tell you right now, that company within 60 days saw a $9 million increase in their
Wow.
revenue just from those abandoned contracts, those installed pieces of equipment.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this as another statistic for that company: in 9 months, in 18 months, it was $90 million in additional
Wow.
revenue just from that activity. So one proof of concept was we were able to scale. It's not about trying to do everything, not trying to boil the ocean. It's like
Yep.
it's good to know what's in the ocean, but you don't want to boil it. And at the end of the day, you can just move the needle with one piece of data, one piece of information that can really make all the difference.
Yeah. Well, Dan, as always, I learned so much from you. It was a great conversation. I think, a couple of things that stood out to me is, kind of what we ended on here is that you can make small incremental changes that will have a very big impact to your organization and cost savings in many cases because there's kind of this incessant, I would say, stealing of revenue or eating revenue by virtue that we have very inefficient systems. I also love the fact that we talked about this idea of like this audit between sales and marketing to, again, align those technologies, make sure that we're not having redundant systems that aren't getting us what we need. And then last but not least, one topic that I always love to talk about is the importance of data. And it's a double-edged sword, right? We're getting so much more data from everywhere, but are we able to actually use that data and turn it into insights for us to make critical and smart business decisions? So for those that want to get in contact with you or Vendor Neutral, how do we find you on social media? How do we learn more about this stuff from you? Give us all your credentials.
Well, you can absolutely find Dan Cilley on LinkedIn. I'm probably one and only. So it's easy to find me there. Vendorneutral.com, our website. And again, there's just a abundance of free resources. Go into our library of resources, go into our sales technology selection resources. There's nothing there that's going to cost you a dime. Please leverage it, learn from it, take advantage of the information. Our clients, when they're educated and aware, are far more successful than us coming in and telling them what to do from the get-go. So very easily, you can reach out to us at any point. We'd be happy to help answer any questions, but Vendor Neutral is here to help clear the fog surrounding the identification, the integration, the selection, and the adoption of these resources.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely encourage everybody that's listening to the podcast to go ahead and take advantage of those resources. Again, they're free and informative, and we'll continue the conversation. So Dan, again, thank you for your time, and good luck with everything.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to the Rev Engine podcast. I hope today's episode provided you with some actionable insights that will help you begin the process of transforming your organization to a high-performing revenue engine. If you found today's episode valuable, we ask that you support the show's growth in 3 ways. First, share the episode with your friends and colleagues. Second, follow me on social media at Meet Jeff Davis on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And finally, give us feedback on who you'd like to see on the show next. That's all for this episode. We look forward to having you join us next time where we continue the conversation on how to build a high-performing revenue engine.